Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to all. Heaven today, and we have honored by Barry Bergman being our darshan. But first, we have a bracha, or is it our sponsor, David?
Actually, in my rush to get here, I did not bring the sponsors ad with me, so
Oh dear.
the sponsor list this week.
Would you care to tell us who the sponsor is?
I would rather not diminish the impact.
It's a visual, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're sponsorless this week, but for those that know, we have a sponsor every week, and they have been usually witty and creative. So if you wouldn't mind, there we go. All right. So let's do the Birkat Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'tzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot v'divrei Torah. Arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratecha l'vinu v'yeh amcha v'Yisrael v'yeh natnu b'tzatzeinu b'tzatze'ei amcha beit Yisrael Kulanu yadei shmecha Umdei Toratecha l'shma Baruch atah Adonai Umdei Torah li'am Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Toratahu Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'Torah. Before Barry begins, I just wanted to also let everybody know that we're having a group aliyah to thank the Darshanim for our service during this summer, and it's going to be September 11th, either in person or virtually. So mark it down for the Darshanim. Okay, with that, Barry Bergman, please.
Okay. All right, so the parsha today is Shoftim. Justice, justice you shall pursue. These are the words that summarize this week's parsha of Shoftim. Shoftim gives us guidelines for how to achieve justice. In the pursuit of justice, we are commanded to appoint judges. The judge is not allowed to show favoritism to friends or to accept bribes. Justice must be fair. This parsha says, your eye must not have pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. This means that there must be compensation for any harm done to a victim, and that you are to apply the law equally against everyone in the community. A minimum of 2 witnesses is required to secure a conviction in the capital or corporal punishment case. 1 witness is not sufficient. Individuals who testify falsely are liable to receive the punishment which they sought to have imposed upon their innocent victim. We are also instructed not to move the boundary marker of our neighbor. We are told to establish 3 cities of refuge for the inadvertent murderer. These cities are only for the murderer who kills his neighbor unintentionally and without hate. These cities are established to prevent revenge killings. This parsha looks for the just solution in each of the situations mentioned. It's, there've always been places in the world where corruption is rampant and justice does not prevail. And today we're going to look at least at how the Jewish people have decided to pursue justice. So I want to start on verse 21, and I'll just read it. It says, do not plant an Asherah, no tree at all besides the altar of God, your God, which you shall make for yourself. And Asherah is a tree that was considered under protection, a special protection of a pagan deity. If this tree thrived, it was considered a manifestation of the power of the deity. So pagans, of course, worship nature, and according to Raphael, Samson Raphael Hirsch, Judaism looks at the spiritual world, and it's he says, if you submit to God, then there'll be abundance in the physical world. So this got me thinking, it's like it's a tree, by the altar, and it's saying, well, this is not a good thing. And, now we have our planet is basically on fire. And is it because we haven't given enough attention to nature? Or is it because we haven't really been good Jews and followed the teachings of God? And I just was curious as to what people thought about that.
Well, I think it's a little both. That from what I understand, again, I already firsthand knowledge that out in California, they built houses way too close to forests, and so things got out of hand, and so it's man-made and it's greed. So that's one thing. The other thing is you could point to the Amazon rainforest. They're ripping down these lush forests to clear for land for total greed purposes. So I think that's one. So I think that's one of the major ones. The other ones are the pollution. It's cheaper to dump hazardous waste than to destroy it safely. So again, greed.
We haven't really listened to.
Are we, Barry, hi, this is Charlene. Right, right now that there was this new report about climate change, the effect of climate on our planet, which we're all living today. I don't know, what's the temperature today? Well, anyway, yesterday was what, almost 100. So we know we're living it. And so I think about it a lot. And I think, what can we as individuals do? And one of the things that they talk about is how important it is to plant trees. And so I don't live in a house anymore. I live in an apartment, but I was thinking about that, like even for our temple, would there be a way for us to plant more trees? And it seems like that's an easy thing to do compared to roofs. I know they're also talking about that. There was a young boy who just had a bar mitzvah, and he's really into this solar paneling and trying to get the temple interested. I mean, that's quite expensive, but certainly trees are not.
So I guess,
I'm sorry, and then I was just also thinking about Eitz Chaim, it's a tree of life, our Torah.
yeah, so I think what I'm trying to really focus on, saying, geez, if we were really followed the rules of the Torah, and would there be this situation we're having now with the environment? Or is it something where we should just be planting trees and just paying attention to the environment and not really, following the laws of the Torah, just trying to fix nature, and which, can you get there through following, the Jewish law?
I think that it's a really good start, because a lot of what's in the Jewish law is how to take care of yourself, your family, your neighbors, the community, and it kind of keeps going out further in circles, that as you deal with what is closest to you and you fix it, you can move outward and offer your experience to others. And I think Marty is right that a lot of what has happened is because we've, as a human race, we've been greedy, and we Jews have not been successful at communicating and being good examples necessarily for others in the world. We've been greedy too.
Well, I did not check this jacket that I'm wearing for Shatnez. So it could be that I have caused the drought in California and the fires. I think I don't literally believe that by not following halacha that I have caused climate problem. Not only that, but throughout the Bible, our ancestors repeatedly left the land of Israel because there was a drought and famine, and had to find food elsewhere. So I don't see the Torah as telling us that by our actions we can somehow avoid natural calamities. I think, except in the Shema, where it seems to disingenuously state that if we follow halacha, then the rains will fall and our crops will be bountiful, which which I dutifully read when we read the Shema, but I don't believe it. So I'm not sure that we can get from Jewish law and practice to solving environmental problems, except in the broadest possible way, which is that we hold human life dear and precious, and we want to sustain it.
I
But
don't.
maybe, sorry.
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
No, I just was going to say maybe we're very community oriented. The Jewish, as a Jewish thing, we care about community, and I mean, human nature is we want things immediate, and and so things got out of hand, and here we are with the climate problem, because technology grew very fast, or everything grew very fast, or housing grew very fast, or climate change happened, and it happened, we were asleep. But I think the thing that I see from the Jewish perspective is a lot of care about community and people around us, and that would make us aware of environment, because I mean, I clearly remember Hartman with the masks. It's not an individual thing that we wear masks, it's a community thing because we care about other people. And so so from the Jewish perspective, to me, that's what seems to make us care.
All right.
Who else wants to weigh in?
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
so I'll weigh in, stir things up a little bit. I think we have to hold God responsible for a good bit of this. God made people with a certain nature, and part of our nature is finding it difficult when it comes to long-term reinforcers. So if you think of our old friend Skinner, right, there's immediate consequences and long-term consequences. And humans are built to appreciate immediate consequences much more than long-term, right? So as we all know, when you walk by the ice cream store and you go in, it tastes good now. It's only 3 months later that your shorts don't fit so well. So you go to the things that people said, like, for example, Marty, the immediate consequences of building a house in areas on the ocean or near, places in California, it's very hard to think 10 years, 40 years down the line, what's going to happen. So if we are partners with God, I think we have to partner some of the blame or responsibility with God for giving us a nature that makes it really hard to do what Native Americans suggest we do, right? Think 7 generations out about the effects of what we do to the environment.
And I'd like to
And
weigh
if
in.
there's a single,
Cliff,
if there's a single lightning bolt and I disappear, then you'll see that God wasn't so happy with this idea.
Steve, which Native Americans are you talking about? There's a lot of different kinds.
which
You mean
Native
like-
Americans?
Which Native Americans? Some people
Yeah.
call them Indians.
No, but they have a wide range of beliefs among them. So I'm just calling you on making generalizations about Native Americans.
All right, next time designate the tribe you're referring to. All right, Cliff,
The Nipmuc
Cliff.
are the ones out here.
Yeah.
talk to us, Cliff.
Fair enough.
Thank you. You know, I appreciate the comment of anybody wanting to weigh in, because frankly, a long time ago, about 15 years ago, I was much bigger than this. And in fact, I was about twice this size. And yeah, but didn't have surgery or pills or any of those things. But what's amazing to me is that, you know, I don't need as big a home. I don't need as big a car. I don't use as much fuel, either food or for my vehicle. I don't need so many things. And yet it started with the chocolate mint brownie at the Oneg. You know, I remember those things. And, you know, and it just, you know, was a snowball rolling. And it's kind of interesting because, I mean, that is in part my fault, but it is in part, you know, just a cultural thing. It is in part the sad American, you know, the standard American diet. And surprisingly, because I also used to work in real estate, and I remember I was in Atlanta, and we were building a shopping mall, and there were bulldozers out there bulldozing the forest. So in order to be able to do that, and it hurt to see us do that. And but then I also remember there's Stanley Park in Vancouver, British Columbia, where 100 years ago they bulldozed it as well to create a army barracks. And once they leased it back to the city for $1, it was in less than 100 years that it would be a beautifully canopied forest again. So you know, it's nothing that man does will, you know, we may not be here, but God will continue with doing whatever is necessary for creation. So anyway, that's where I have my hope. And with that, thank y'all.
I'm thinking of something completely different. I'm thinking of agriculture. And there's references in the Talmud that we're reading about leaving land fallow so it regenerates. You're not supposed to plant on the same plot of land forever. Isn't it like every 7 years or something like that, you have to leave it fallow? And that was something that was sustaining to the ground. And so now instead we use fertilizers. And I'm sure that they're not leaving any land fallow anywhere. The other thing, it just what Cliff was saying, I just don't know how much more impatient we are than we were before. I can't get into the head of someone who lived in the 12th century or someone who lived in the 19th century or 18th century. Right now, I just know that patience is really in short supply. And I think it's related to, you know, our use of the internet and our use of instant communication. And we're at a different mindset, and I'm just not sure how much that's playing on us as far as needing all these other things that people are saying they need. Anyways, but I think patience is a thing that's in short supply, and I'm not sure whether God fits into that.
You know, Yuval Harari, the Israeli anthropologist, suggests that the downfall of humanity was when we became farmers. That,
Really? Farmers?
We should have stayed hunter-gatherers. We would have been much happier that way. Our lives would have been shorter.
And he's a vegetarian.
So from that perspective, when God told Adam that all of nature was at his disposal to do it as he saw fit, that was when the trouble began.
Well, before that, there was be fruitful and multiply. But most people don't realize the phrase after that. It says "Umalu et ha'ara," it's fill up the earth. And perhaps what we've done is we've not only filled up the earth, but we've overfilled up the earth. Apropos to what Joan said about letting the land fallow, the Shemitah year is actually starting this coming year, right after Rosh Hashanah, but that only applies to lands in Israel. And there was recently an article about a farmer in Israel, an Orthodox family, that's considering the implication of what it means to observe the Shemitah year as one of the mitzvot of the Tanakh. And there are estimates that about a quarter of the farms in Israel will be observing Shemitah this coming year.
Wow.
The third thought that came to me as we've had this discussion is the commandment al tachshit, do not destroy, which usually refers to cutting down trees, but it could be interpreted more broadly than that. But apropos to, I think, what Steve was saying, it's up to man and free will to think about how we interpret this. I mean, I think that's our challenge as Jews who read the commandments and try to understand that. Because certainly there are times when you do have to cut down a tree. Part of the problems in Canada and California that was just cited about the forest fires there is that they haven't appropriately cut down fire lanes within the various fire lanes. So I think the Tanakh guides us with these clever, pithy words, Hu Bru Malu et Ha'aretz, or Al Tachshit, which observes Shemitah, but it's really up to us to see how we want to interpret it in our own times and environments.
Esther.
I would say about Shemitah, because I grew up in Israel, we used to observe Shemitah, Shnat Shemitah. What I want to add too, we are not only the only religion or people that habited the earth. There are other people, and if you look at China, for instance, they don't adhere to the laws of God. They do whatever they want in order for them to get forward. So we cannot force our thoughts on other people. We can do our best, but other people, it's a free choice. So that's why I'm saying we can adhere to the laws, but what about our neighbors?
Yes, those who cut down trees.
You're right. You're right. I agree with you. I agree with you 100% because that's what bothers me, because needless to say, the tree did not do anything to them. But they decided it's better to cut the tree than let it go. And we do that very often. We don't care what the other person say or want or do. And it's too bad, even though the Torah guide us to be good, to follow the laws and do everything to the T, but not everybody does it. And that's a problem.
So I think, we got, I don't know if we should continue on with this discussion or move on to some other parts of the Parsha, because there's a lot of stuff in here. Is that okay, or?
Yes, let's
Move
move
along.
on.
Yeah, thank
Keep
you.
going.
Barry,
Yeah.
Barry, may I just say one little thing? It's not earth-shattering at all, but as everyone is speaking about the relationship of the human behavior and God's part in it, I tend to not relate to it as God. I really relate to it much more as Mother Nature. Somehow that speaks to me so much more when you say, Mother Nature responds in such a way to man-made issues that deal with our natural world. I don't know if anyone else feels that, but.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen, brother. You're right.
It was views like that got Spinoza kicked out of the Jewish community.
Could be.
I relate to Father Nature in addition to Mother Nature.
Yeah, whatever to Father Nature, that's what I want to know. Yeah.
Okay.
Go forward, Barry.
All right. So on chapter 17, so starting at verse 2, I'm going to paraphrase. If there is found among you a man or woman who has affronted the Lord your God and transgressed his covenant, turning to the worship of other gods and bowing down to them, to the sun or the moon or any of the heavenly host, something I never commanded, you shall take the man or woman who did that wicked thing out to the public place, and you shall stone them to death. If someone is evil and serves other gods, you should stone together. Yeah, I got that. All right, but not based on the testimony of one person. A minimum of 2 witnesses is required to secure a conviction in a capital or corporal punishment case. 1 witness is not sufficient. So I mean, it's using the witnesses on the here, but it comes up later. But the question I have is, why is putting idol worshipers to death considered just?
And who
Because
decides who's an idol worshiper?
because they've offended God.
Well, that's what.
Is that
ISIS
enough?
says.
Is that enough of a cause? You know, it's one thing if you kill your neighbor, you intentionally kill your neighbor. Okay, that sounds like a reason maybe to be stoned to death, maybe. But you know, just worshiping an idol, is that type of offense?
Well,
is that really just?
Well, this is one of about, I don't know, 50 or more offenses that are punishable by stoning that we find abhorrent now. Although the one advantage of stoning, as opposed to our modern methods of execution, is that it makes the carrying out of the sentence something quite vivid and real for the entire community, because they all were called upon to participate in it. There's something to be said for that. But we also know that the rabbis had a real problem with the death penalty in general, and almost never carried it out. I have no way of justifying this, other than that the temptation to idolatry and to the moral offenses that were associated with idolatry, the temptation was so high that this was a way of getting people's attention to try to minimize the temptation to stray.
I think it's also preservation of the group, obviously, that if you want to keep them together, you have to make sure that they're worshiping one God and not many. But also, all through our plight through the desert, have we said, don't be like, the Moabites, the Girgashites, the whatever, Kyrgyzstan, whatever they are. Don't be like them. And we've heard that over and over and over again, because I think our people were tempted by those folks, because they were doing something that looked obviously pretty good to us. And Hashem had to constantly remind us, no, stay on my path. I'm actually the one that's going to bring you to the promised land. Those folks won't.
Yeah, I think it's all metaphorical. I don't think there was ever. I think it's purely a metaphor to as David Rosenfeld said, to get our attention. But there's an interior logic to it that I think really hangs together nicely. Again, if it was truly meant that you were to take people into the public square and stone them, that would be abhorrent, and none of us could sign on to that. If you do regard it as metaphor, which I think you have to, I think the whole Bible is metaphor, and that's certainly not my invention. I think a number of people with far greater minds than mine have said that. Most recently,
well, there was Rambam for one.
Yeah, and up to the current time, the guy who always comes to talk to us at Temple from Hartman.
Mika Goodman.
Yeah, Mika Goodman. I mean, so it's so that's no original thought there. But if you do regard it as metaphor, which I think you have to, and then it's got an interior logic to it that I think is in some ways quite beautiful and makes a great deal of sense, which is to say that that the Talmud and the Torah is offering, as you said, Marty, a real way of life. And it's not just I got a way of life, you got a way of life, I think mine is better than yours. When much, certainly when the Talmud is being written, and I imagine, when the Torah was being put together as well, life was the world was a tough, brutal place. Certainly the Roman Empire and was just a brutal society in so many respects. And so now you had this religion coming forward that talked about, of all things, that we're going to treat each other really nicely and we're going to really pay attention to each other and just, really try and be kind to each other, which just stands out in such marked contrast to what was going on contemporaneously.
Unless you're a Jebusite or a Girgashite.
Well, yeah, I don't think, I think that's metaphorical too. And I think what it's saying is, look, this is really something here. This is so far outside the norm of the world around you. And I'm really offering you something new, or you're being offered something new and different that is just so beautiful. But if you get off, and it's so easy to get off the path, that but metaphorically, I'm going to tell you the dangers of, and it's not that you're going to stone people, it's that you yourself will figuratively die because you will not get the benefits of this enormously, powerfully beneficial way of living. And if you read it that way as metaphor, as I say, I think there's an internal logic to it. And I dare say a beauty to it, because it's offering a path of life that is just so different from what was going on contemporaneously and is so beautiful that don't get off the path because it's so easy to do that, because then you yourself will die in a figurative sense, because you won't have lived the gorgeous existence that I'm offering you.
Thank you. Joel Batalski, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This whole parsha to me is about justice. Justice you shall pursue. The whole religion, the whole Jewish religion, our whole way of life as Jews should be focused on justice. Justice and righteousness is what we are about. Yet the news and what we see is not justice, is injustice. How do you deal with injustice? And that's why we have to go to Jewish religion. Now, do we focus on an eye for an eye when we find injustice? No, because if we looked at eye for an eye, not only would we would both be blind. So what does the Torah tell us about justice? There must be compensation for the victim. That's what we have to deal with when we find injustice. How do we compensate the victim or victims? Again, this is who we are, and what life's about is about justice. And I think that's what the parsha is about. Torah is our life. Justice is our life. That's what we do every day. How do we deal with the injustices of life is the question of life. How do you personally deal with injustices? Do you say something? Do you do something? Or do you ignore it and walk by?
Thank you.
Not to, and this will be the last time I'll be done here, but to tie in what Joel just said to our previous conversation. One we're about to find out if we really are about justice, because there is a looming environmental justice issue that we are going to have to deal with, and it's going to hit us front and center. After the UN report came out, there was a large conference, and the poorer nations were, in my view, quite rightly, in talking about justice, saying, look, for 300 years, the industrialized world enriched themselves at the cost of the environment. And now the industrialized world apparently has woken up and realized what they've been doing for the last 200 or 300 years has been enormously destructive. But it's the industrialized world cannot ask us, the poorer nations, to pay the price. When we are poor, we didn't get the benefits of all of that technological development. And in fact, we suffered as a result of it. And now you can't ask us to pay the price, or certainly not the disproportionate price, for what you've reaped. And it's you, the United States, Europe, China, you need to pay that price, and you need to compensate us. So to Joel's point, and tied into what we were just talking about, are we going to do that? Are we going to pony up and say, yep, you're right, we've benefited from all this pollution for the last 300 years. We've become an immensely wealthy nation, but now everyone's got to cut back. And are we going to pay the price? Are we going to help the poorer nations who are not responsible, or largely not responsible, for where we are? I have a very dim faith that that's going to occur, but I think that goes directly to what we were just talking about before, and Joel's point about, are we all about justice?
Steve?
Barry, you want to go forward, or?
Yeah, I think so. Because so on verse 15 says, you shall be free to set a king up over yourself, one chosen by the Lord your God. Be sure to set as king over yourself one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner up over you. So the question I have is, if the king is chosen by God, how would it be an option to choose a foreigner?
It contradicts itself.
Right. Yeah, that's what I think.
Well,
Sorry.
is,
I think it's, God helps you to choose that person's the right person, but he tells you, don't go out of your limits. And the limit is, a foreigner cannot be your God. Your king, sorry. And that's what I see it, because you have to have a border where you can choose your people. And beyond that, you have no choice. That's not you're out of your border.
maybe it's an admonition not to take the decision into their own hands.
All right, well, moving on. On verse 18, it says, rather when he sits upon the throne of his sovereignty, he shall write for himself a duplicate of this teaching. This is referring to the king. He should write for himself a duplicate of this teaching in a book out of the one that is in the custody of the priests, the Levites. In other words, the king, when he sits on the throne, is to write for himself 2 copies of the Torah. According to Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the king acknowledges that he's not above the law and that he needs to be devoted to the law. This parsha implies that the act of writing 2 copies of the Torah will prepare the king to rule justly. However, there are parts of the Torah where things don't appear so just. How do we teach justice using the Torah? And all right, I'll ask another part of it. Are there parts that we should skip in the Torah if you're studying the Torah to be just?
Well, given the fact that the book of Dvarim was sort of discovered later, as it were, the description here of how a king should behave: not too many horses, not too many wives, just spend your time copying over the law. Those are basically the only duties that God has spelled out for king. It would appear to be a critique of King Solomon, who sort of failed at all of these grounds. We have this image of Solomon as being wise, and yet his behavior as king was in the end rather unwise and invited idolatry back into the kingdom because of the way he behaved. So it seems to be saying, hey, you can have a king, but you can't really trust him. You just have to keep him modest and circumscribe his responsibilities.
When I read that, I thought of two things. First, I thought of Queen Elizabeth. I don't think she'd like that parsha too much. But then after I thought that, I wondered, would we like that? Do we want our king or queen to live a humble life? Or do we really want them to have grandeur? Do we want them to be just like us? Or do we want to put them on a pedestal? And I think we do. I don't think people would like it if Queen Elizabeth was walking into the grocery store or, wasn't in one of her, I don't know, how many cars does she have that must cost each one about $200,000 each? Would we like it if she was in a Ford or, just going about her business? I don't think we would. So does anybody have any comment on that?
Well, I don't know, compare Trump and Biden. If we want our leaders to live lavishly and sit on a golden throne, then I guess we would admire Trump. But if we prefer a more modest leader who rides Amtrak, we would pick Biden.
Yeah, but I don't know that he's that modest. I think Biden has a nicer life than probably most Americans.
We don't want our presidents to be paupers.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We don't want our presidents to be paupers.
No, of course not. Of course not.
But do we want them to live lavishly at our expense? That's basically Queen Elizabeth.
Right, right.
You think about though, our presidents all live in government housing, so. Raina.
Yeah, I am trying to see what I'm thinking this morning. One is I was very surprised when I read the paragraph this week and it said about the king. The comments were that it's okay for us to ask for us, the Jewish people, to ask for a king. It's just that we cannot ask for a king like all other nations, like the kings of all other nations. And that surprised me that it is okay for us to ask for a king. I have not heard that before from any rabbis. And the other thing that justice this morning that came to me is that.
Excuse me for interrupting. Rena, I don't know about others, but we're having a very difficult time understanding. Your voice is coming in and out. Is there anything you can do on your end?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me now?
Much better
Yes, much
already.
better.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was saying that I was very, very surprised to read in the comments that we can ask for a king, just not a king like the kings of other nations. And I had never heard before, in fact, I heard the opposite, that we should not ask for a king, because look at the history after we did have kings. And the other thing that came to me about justice this morning that I never thought of before is that we are told that God is the only just entity here, because God can see our past, can see maybe even our future, but definitely our past. And so it's what we merit. A lot of things that if we see the Jewish people in the desert, it was all about God intervening because of the merit that we had for how our ancestors behaved. And I'm just thinking about, is our type of justice that we can master as human beings is just kind of policing, but not really just, because we just can't do it. We just can't. And that maybe courts and laws and all of that is more about policing than it is about justice. But I don't know. It's just a thought that came to me this morning listening to you.
Well, as Anatole France said, the law and its infinite justice prohibits both rich people and poor people from sleeping under bridges. So there is law that we need to maintain an orderly society, and then there's laws that we maintain to protect the haves from the have-nots. And we need the wisdom to distinguish them. Yep, Steve?
Yeah, so I want to get back in God's good graces. Before I gave God a hard time about the human nature and the delayed reinforcement. So let's go back to something Joel said. Joel said, look, this is a parsha about justice. But who would be against justice, right? Is there anybody who says, I'm for injustice? The tricky part is, we all know, which justice are we talking about, right? And different people gave examples of it. So the country is torn apart in many places about vaccinations. For some people, it's unjust for people, right, not to vaccinate because it's public health. Other people say it's unjust to take away my rights. And you can stir up passions, as we know, very easily about different views of justice. What I think is pretty great here in this parsha is that God says, look, these matters for human beings are human matters, and they change or evolve from different cultures. It's not that God can't give guidelines, but the notion right from the beginning of, we have to appoint judges and magistrates and a king from our own people to help us work through the nuances of what's right, what's justice as it evolves over time is pretty great when we think about it. It's not God saying, God is the sort, God knows everything, right? But God is willing to diminish God's self to say humans need to work this out, what the particulars of justice are. And I think that's a pretty great message that we send to the world about God and about ourselves.
Thank you. Esther, briefly, because we're winding down, and then Cliff, briefly.
Okay, I'm going to
Esther.
a couple of sentences. I believe in morality. Dr. Harav Jonathan Zett wrote a lot about morality, and it came out from justice till dope. Because if we don't adhere to that, then the whole society is going down the tube. Thank you.
Cliff.
Okay. Yes, thank you. What I was going to say is I like what somebody commented earlier in terms of would Judaism have saved us from the particular situation? And I was thinking about the story about Thomas Jefferson and Monticello, that in essence, because he had to put up the pretense of having money, he was actually $8 million in debt when he died, and they had to sell off. They were selling off Monticello. It turned into a silkworm farm, and people approached him. Approached someone to, because he admired Thomas Jefferson so much, would he be willing to buy Monticello and preserve it? And he said yes, and he went ahead and did so. And he offered it back to the government, but they didn't take it because of the Civil War at that time. But the name of the guy was Admiral Uriah Levy, and he said nowhere else would he have been able to rise to such level. But the fact that he had it in his inside, the Jewish values and everything else, eventually they did. And so I think the Jewish values are at play, no matter whether we think whether we think they are or not, they're here with us. And I mean, that's why we're here on a Saturday morning. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Barry, wrap us up here.
Well, I don't know if it's, I guess the question is, I have another verse. We'll just quickly go through. I guess we won't have much time to discuss it. Verse 2 in chapter 19 says, "You shall separate for yourselves 3 cities in the midst of your land that God, your God, is giving you to take possession of it. You shall prepare yourself the road to these and divide the territory of your land, which God, your God, is giving you as an inheritance into 3 parts, and it shall serve you for every manslayer to flee there." So we are told, this in essence, we're told to establish 3 cities of refuge for the inadvertent murderer. These cities are only for murderers who kill his neighbor unintentionally and without hate. They're established to prevent revenge killings. So a man who intentionally kills another and tries to seek refuge in one of these cities will be turned away. So I guess I have a question, which obviously I don't think we'll get really to the answer, is what type of punishment do you think there should be for the unintentional killing due to negligence? So that, where you've actually, you haven't done it intentionally, but by the same token, the death is really caused by you, in a negligence, due to negligence.
What we call involuntary manslaughter.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking more that, you maintained let's say you have a building or something and you didn't you didn't follow the codes and someone walks in and falls through the floor. It's like, you didn't intentionally kill the person, but it's due to your negligence, that they died,
Well, is it enough that they can sue you for damages, or does there have to be a criminal penalty too to deter people from doing that?
Under the code of Hammurabi, you would have been killed as the builder. the Code of Hammurabi would have inflicted capital punishment if your building fell and killed somebody.
Now I gotta ask, do we know whether the Code of Hammurabi was actually carried out to the letter? Or was it like our laws where it said one thing, but
well, it was kind of a dogma type of thing, so I don't know, but it was more laws themselves instead of interpretations.
I think the cities of refuge is a great concept because how many times have we seen that somebody takes a law in their own hands without knowing all the facts and ends up killing somebody who's innocent, where if you truly didn't intend to kill somebody, as an example, I think I remember that, if you're chopping wood and the axe handle flies off and hits somebody in the head and kills them, I mean, that's not, you didn't intend to do that. But on the other hand, that I'm sure the family of the dead person would probably come after you and try and kill you, where you can go to one of these cities of refuge and be safe.
yes, the key was to go to a city of refuge that had a very old.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Kohen Gadol, right?
Yes.
Right. For those that don't know, it was for the length of the life of the Kohen Gadol at the time. So if there was a younger man, you'd be there for an awful long time. Okay, any other things? We're a little early. Any other questions? Anything else you want to bring up?
The only other, chapter 20, verse 1, this kind of just got me thinking. It says, when you take the field against your enemies and see horses and chariots, forces larger than yours, have no fear of them, for the Lord your God who brought you from the land of Egypt is with you. For it is the Lord your God who marches with you to do battle for you against your enemy to bring you victory. So to me, it says, well, there's no real mention of right or wrong. War is really, in this situation, purely based on territory controlled. And so what does that mean today as far as, let's even talk in regards to Israel, as far as, their role in any type of conflict? I mean, should they be fighting for what's right, or is it just fighting for land? Is that what really war is all about? And there's no real
is there
right cause or wrong cause?
Could it be both? We're fighting for land, but it's because it's right.
Yeah, but I mean, you can flip it around depending upon the situation. What if you're fighting for more lands? What if you say, well, we want to invade Syria? Is that, the question is, the way it seems to read here, well, God's with you. Carry on, whatever you do, you're right. It's kind of like God will always be there no matter what you decide to do in war.
Right, and that's why we keep God out of the equation. We do not, the IDF does not fight wars for God.
Right, but I'm really looking at this, what it says here, and it gives that, it seems to give blessing to whatever, as long as you're the Jewish people, do whatever you have to do. It's fine.
If it's sanctioned by God. It doesn't say do whatever you want. It says just do what God tells you. Don't go out and fight battles unless God wants you to fight that battle. Which, as a practical guide today, is totally useless.
Also, could I say something? This was just prior to go into the land, right? Or right after you got into the land, but not forever, because this was going to be a land where no murder happened and was just justice and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if there was a time limit on that.
Well, in the first instance, there was going to be a lot of murder.
A lot of what?
There's going to be a lot of murder in the first instance. I lumped this together with stoning the heretic. It's an idea that we have moved past and for the better.
Okay.
I guess.
Joe?
I think that the number one story for me this week in the news is the fall of Afghanistan. And as we look at the Parsha, how do you deal with justice and the fall of this country and the people and what's happening there? I mean, where is the justice? There's got to be some answers and questions about these huge number of people, particularly the Taliban's treatment of women. And if Kabul falls, the embassy's evacuated and the whole country falls, what should we do anything, the United States, or what should anybody do?
We have been doing, we've been there for 20 years. We spent billions and billions of dollars, 3,000 people, I believe 3,000 troops are dead over 20 years. Come on, how much more can we do? And it seems as though that the Afghans don't want to stand up for themselves. So, it's not like we didn't try. The longest engagement we've had in the country of our country in a war in a foreign country.
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we're out of time.
All right, but anyway, I just wanted to give another view. Okay, anyway, listen, thank you very much, Barry. Good job. Next week is Charlene Finkel. And I hope some people heard we're going to have a group aliyah on September 11th, thanking us for our participation for being darshanim during the summer. So shall we rise for Kaddish Rabbanan?
Yitkadal,
Yitkadal v'yikadash me Rabbah. B'alma divrach kivrutei, b'amlich malchutei, v'chayakon v'yomechon v'chayedekol b'it Yisrael. Bagala v'zman kariv yivru amen. Yeheshmei Rabbah Mubarak Le'olam Me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpalar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei the kudasha b'riyachu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata v'shukata v'nechamata da'aviran v'yama v'yivru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehan v'al kol Talmidehan v'al kol ma'andaskim v'yaraita v'yatra v'di v'chol atar v'yatar Yehi l'chol l'chon shlomo rabba Pina v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin v'tzana raficha Vakana min kadam abuhon di b'shmaya v'imru amen. Yehi shlomo rabba min samaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amen. Ose shalom b'imrumav u'barachamav v'sa shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, yasher koach.
Talk, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you.
Great. I'm off.